Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody had a great Christmas yesterday and that you had a great time with your family. Today I am here to do a reading progress update video for the week of December 14th to December 26th. I am going to be going through a lot of books, so this is going to take a while. The first book that I'm reading is called The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. She is known for her historical fiction books about World War II, which is why I decided to read this book. I also just read a book from the Manhattan to From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR about a code breaker, which was really, really interesting, called The Woman Who Broke Codes by Jason Fagoni, and I gave that 4 stars. I started this book last week on the 18th, and I am on chapter 34, page 300. The next book I am reading is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet by the same author of The Night Circus. I read The Night Circus in 2023 and gave it 5 stars. And of course, the other Romeo and Juliet retelling that I read that year was called One for My Enemy by Oliver Blake, which was also 5 stars. Romeo and Juliet itself gets 3.5 stars. In this book, I am on page 311. The next book that I am reading was on Gabby Reeves' worst books of 2025 list, and I am tending to agree with her that this book is kind of confusing and the plot goes all over the place. I read another thriller book. It was a Christmas novella by this same author, Peter Swanson, at the beginning of the month. I gave The Christmas Guest 4 stars. This book is probably going to get 2.5 because the plot is just all over the place and it's overwhelmingly confusing, and I'm going to probably DNF it. And I'm not even very far into it. I'm only on page 72. The next book that I'm reading that I borrowed from the library is called The Music of What Happens by Bill Kozinger. I found this book on the YA shelf at the library for new releases. This is the first time I've ever read anything by this author before. I started this on the 18th, and I am on page 211. Out of the completed books from the library, the first book I want to talk about today is The Build a Boyfriend Project by Mason Deaver. This was another recommendation from Gabby at Gabby Reads. She read this in November, and if I remember correctly, she gave it 4 stars, but I would have to go back and watch her video again because I'm a little rusty on her rating. But I love this book. It was so sweet. It's about 2 guys named Eli and Peter, and it's a male romance, and I love how their relationship builds up. Eli Francis is stuck I hate it when this sticker covers up the writing. The build, I can read you though. Since I'm having trouble reading the description a little because the sticker is covering up the words at the top, I can just skip the beginning of it. When Eli's roommate push him to date as he can get over his ex once and for all, they set him up with Peter Park, tall, handsome, and unbelievably awkward. The date is a complete disaster and further proof of Eli that love isn't for him. But when even his boss overhears Eli recounting the catastrophic night. He suggests Eli teach Peter to be a better boyfriend through a series of simulated dates that he can then use for an article. But Eli has other ideas. He plays along, pretending to write the article that his boss wants, while secretly interviewing Peter about growing up queer in the South and coming of age, dating wise, and adulthood. Eli hopes writing this sort of piece will finally get him the promotion he deserves, and in exchange he will help Peter learn how to date. But the more time Eli spends with Peter, the closer they become, and the lines between what's real and what's fake begin to blur. Before long, Eli is forced to face his greatest fears so that he can become the writer he wants to be and secure the love he's always needed. So as I was saying before, the build-up between Eli and Peter's relationship is super sweet, and I feel like there's a rom-com movie that has a similar theme to this. Maybe it's How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I don't remember. If you guys can think of the movie that this plot is similar to, like about a character writing an article about relationships for work and then realizing that the relationship is gonna go nowhere or maybe get better, let me know. The movie I'm thinking about is How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, but maybe I'm getting the plots confused. The next book that I recently read from the library is The Keeper of Magical Things. This is I don't know if it's the sequel, but it's the same author of The Teller of Small Fortunes. And this is a witchy book that focuses on two main characters named Certainty and Aurelia. The two most transport minorly magical artifacts somewhere safe. Shepling, the dullest, least magical village around. There may fix up an old warehouse, separate the gossipy teapots from the kind of flaming swords, and corral an unruly little cat dragon who has tagged along, and above all, avoid complications. The guild's uneasy relationship with citizens is at a tipping point, and the last thing needed is a magical incident. Still, as mage and novice come to know Shepling's residents and each other, they realize that the guild's hoarded magic might do more good being shared. Friendships blossom, while Certainty and Aurelia work to make Shepling the haven it could be, but magic is fickle and attraction. Add attraction and it might spell trouble. So yeah, there's a forbidden relationship in this book because Certainty and Aurelia are supposed to be co-workers and they're not supposed to have a romantic relationship. And I really love how their friendship develops into love. It's very sweet. And Shepling is a very cozy little village. It reminds me of the village in Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. So I gave this book 5 stars, 4.5 to 5. The next book is Don't Sleep with the Dead by Neve Vo. So this is her second retelling of The Great Gatsby, but this time, instead of being from Jordan's point of view, it's from Nick's. And I really enjoyed this book because it gives you an insight into Nick and how he had a crush on Jay Gatsby. Let me tell you, The Great Gatsby is not one of my favorite books. In fact, I read it for the first time in college. I thought it was boring. I thought I would like it after being out of college for 10 years. I was wrong. I still hated it. But this book and The Chosen and the Beautiful, which was Neville is released from a couple of years ago, reimagined these characters as queer characters very well, and I just love her writing style and how lyrical it is. So like The Chosen and The Beautiful, this book got 4.5 stars. The Great Gatsby got 2.5. Now I am going to move forward to the books for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR that I read in the past couple of weeks. The first book that I read is Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm doing a special feature for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR podcast where I focus on 3 books by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book, Daisy Jones and the Six, and After I Do, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So this book focuses on a woman named Hannah who sees how her life would be different if her relationships worked out in different ways. How this book connects to Friends is in the episode, the one with all the Thanksgivings, where they flash back to Thanksgiving in the 1980s when Monica and Rachel are still in high school and Ross and Chandler are in college. And there's another, it's the One That Could Have Been that reimagines them in different situations. Like, in that episode, Rachel is married to Barry and very unhappy. Monica and Chandler still end up together, which is the plotline I like the best. And Monica is still overweight, but Chandler still loves her in spite of that, which is good because one thing I don't like in Friends is the fat shaming of Monica when she was a teenager and how she was kind of bullied for her teenage years. And she was even bullied by her family too, which I didn't like. And I have a theory that her dad was more complicit in the abuse and really cared deeply about both of his children and really wanted to treat them equally, but couldn't because of how his wife was such a jerk. Let's see. Did you find yourself rooting for one ending versus the other? Do you have an opinion on whether Hannah should have ended up with Henry or with Ethan? If you were Hannah, which ending would you have wanted for yourself? To be honest with you, I was actually rooting for Ethan. I really liked their relationship. I thought it was sweet. I didn't think that Henry's relationship with Hannah would have worked out. And there's also a discussion about soulmates in this book, and that's interesting because in one of the episodes of Friends before Monica and Chandler get married, Monica and Chandler are discussing whether or not they believe in soulmates, and Chandler says he doesn't, and Monica says she really doesn't either. She just believes that they met each other at the right time and that their relationship is really great, although he needs to try really, really hard to overcome his issues with being abandoned. I thought there was another question that connected this book to After I Do, but maybe it isn't the discussion questions for After I Do, which I'll get into in a minute. So the next book I read this month is the second book in the Stars Fall series by Kate Hewitt. I borrowed the second book from Kathleen. I'm going to hold up the first book because it's the one that I have a copy of. So this book is written by an author named Kate Hewitt, who is new to me. But basically, the town in this book is extremely similar to Stars Hollow. And this relationship in this book kind of reminds me of Lorelai and Luke a little bit. The main couple in this book their names are Maggie and Zach, and Maggie moves to Stars Falls to open a board game cafe, which is kind of similar to the board game cafe that's like in downtown Portland that Matt and I have been to a couple of times. So in the first book, we meet Lori and Joshua, and how this book connects to Friends is that Rachel dates her coworker Joshua in season 4 when Ross is getting married to Emily. And yeah, that's how this book connects to Friends. But in the second book, Playing for Keeps in Stars Falls, that couple, Zach and Maggie, reminds me of Lorelai and Luke. So this is gonna probably be a 5-star series just because I love the character dynamics. I love how similar these characters are in personality to the characters in Friends. This book was 4 stars, and Playing for Keeps in Stars Falls was 5. The next book is another Taylor Jenkins Reid book called After I Do. This book focuses on 2 main characters named Lauren and Ryan, who are having Lauren and Ryan, who are having trouble in their marriage. So they decide to take a year off from being married to try to work on their relationship and realize if they're even meant to be together. So the conversation that Ryan and Lauren have about their marriage in this book reminds me about the conversation that Ross and Rachel have in the one where Monica sings, where they are realizing that they are not compatible. And the frustrating thing about that is I think they throw that whole conversation out the window because they end up getting together at the end of the show. I feel like Ryan's character was underdeveloped in this book because you don't really hear much about him except at the beginning. And then Lauren's family is talked about a lot. And you meet her whole family. My favorite character in her family is her mom. And I really love all of the advice that her family gives to her about relationships. Oh, okay. I could have sworn there was a discussion question that connects this book to Maybe in Another Life, but maybe I was wrong. Let's see. Okay. Turn to page 125 when Lauren and her mother are discussing marriage. Lauren says she doesn't want to fail at her marriage which her mother dismisses. If you stay married for a number of years and you have a happy time together, then you decide you don't want to be married anymore and you choose to be happy with someone else, then that's not a failure. Do you agree with her? No, I don't, because I would say I have a pretty happy marriage, but like I have had a former friend that I knew in New Hampshire who I'm no longer friends with now, who was in an abusive marriage, and that was a really difficult time for her. So yeah, not all marriages are happy. And I would say how this discussion ties into Friends is in the one with the lesbian wedding, where Rachel's mother tells her that she's getting a divorce from her dad, and Rachel gets really upset at her mother because she's like, why are you telling me this? Why do you think I can help you through this? And her mother says, you didn't marry your Barry honey, but I married mine. And that line from Marlo Thomas to Jennifer Aniston made me really realize that the household that Rachel and her sisters were raised in was probably not a really happy one. As you all know, Rachel comes from a really rich family on Long Island. She went to high school with Monica and Ross. She was best friends with Monica in high school. But I don't think her home life was totally happy, because as her mother divulges about why she's getting a divorce from her dad was always on his boat or doing other things and not really focused on his family, and that's the whole reason why she realizes she needs to divorce him. The reason why this book connects to Friends, aside from that conversation that Rachel and her mom have in the one with the lesbian wedding, is this book reminds me of Ross and Rachel, and when they get married in Las Vegas drunkenly, and then Ross tries to get the marriage annulled, but then he doesn't. So I gave this book 3.5 stars. If Ryan's character had had better development, it would probably have been higher. Discuss the theme of communication within the novel. To what degree do these characters struggle to express themselves? And how do they find alternative ways to doing so when straight dialogue doesn't affect? I mean, I think Ryan has really bad communication, and he tries to improve on this throughout the book by writing Lauren letters while they're separated. But I think the issues could have been solved if they went to couples counseling, probably. And then they would have been able to figure out if their marriage was going to work. Okay, the next book that I am reading for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR is a reread of A Man Called Ove by Friedrich Bachmann. Kathleen and I are reading this for our March TBR, and we're a little bit ahead of the game because we started reading all of the books for January and February at the end of November. So right now we are on the March books, which include Little Women, which I'll get to in a minute. So, A Man Called Ove was on a couple of different book recommendation lists that I found. One was for Gilmore Girls, and this book was paired up with Luke's character. And yeah, I can see why this book was paired up with Luke's character, because he's really Ove is a really grumpy old man, and Luke is very grumpy throughout the whole entire series up until the point I'm at, which is season 4. Luke just comes off as a really grumpy character a lot of the time, especially when he is constantly fighting with Taylor Dosey. Currently in my reread of A Man Called Ove, I am on page 41, so I'm not very far into this yet. The next book that I am rereading for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This book is mentioned in season 3, episode 13 of Friends, the one where Monica and Richard are just friends, when Monica and Richard try to rekindle their relationship after being broken up. And in the B plot, Rachel and Joey have their own book club and exchange books. Joey reads Little Women and Rachel reads The Shining by Stephen King. The character that I relate to the most in Little Women is Jo, because she's a writer and she writes plays that her sisters perform in. And I am working on writing my own one-act play about my disability, which I'm going to start working on very soon, because that is my next project I'm going to be working on. Currently in my reread of Little Women, I am on page 211, chapter 18. The next book I am rereading for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR is Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. The last book in this series is coming out on Tuesday. Kathleen and I are reading it in February, so I am rereading this whole entire series from the beginning to get myself reacquainted with all of the characters and all of their dynamics, and then I can't wait to read the next book, which is the final book in this series, which is called Rome, Kentucky. This book focuses on Annie, who is, I believe, the youngest sister in a group of sisters, and her love interest, Will, reminds me of Joey from Friends. And when Beg, Borrow, or Steal came out at the beginning of the year, Matt and I went to Books A Million in Portland and met Sarah Adams. She was very sweet. One question that I asked her was that if any of the characters in her books were inspired by Friends or Gilmore Girls characters, and she said yes, and that Will in this book is supposed to be similar to Joey. So in my reread of Practice Makes Perfect, I am on page 49, chapter 6. Two Christmas books that I recently finished are The Mistletoe Kisser by Lucy Score. This is the holiday installment in her Blue Moon series, which now I need to read from the beginning because this was the last book in the series and I'm just meeting these characters for the first time. I love Lucy Score's books. I have read by her By a Thread, which I gave 4 stars to, Rock Bottom Girl, which was 3.5, Story of My Life, which was 4.5, and the Knock 'Em Out trilogy, which was a 4.5 trilogy. So I'm really looking forward to the second book that is coming out sometime in 2026. I don't remember the exact date. The second book in this series with Story of My Life is coming out next year. So I'm really excited to read that book because Story of My Life was so good. This book gets 4.5 stars. The next book I got when I was at Barnes & Noble's last week, and Starbucks actually had this on sale for $5 as a special giveaway with your meal. So this is a mystery called Murder at Holly House, holiday Christmas mystery. Yorkshire, 1952. Christmas is fast approaching when a dead stranger is found lodged up the chimney of Holly House in the snow-covered village of Elderby. Is he a simple thief or a would-be killer? Inspector Frank Grassley is ordered to investigate, but as is often the way for him, things don't go according to plan. When the local doctor's husband is murdered by Grasby begins to realize that everyone in Elderberry is hiding something, and if he can't uncover the truth soon, the whole country will pay for a dreadful price. I loved this. I loved how festive the mystery was, and the mystery was also very fun to solve. Another book I finished reading recently is Persepolis, The Story of a Childhood by Marjane Satrapi. I got this book from the library at my church, so the next time I go to church, I need to return it. This is a graphic novel about a girl who migrated to America from Iran during the same time that Malala was in that area. And first of all, this is a graphic novel, so it made the story of growing up during the war more digestible for me to understand. Not that Malala's story was not as gripping. I really enjoyed that book too, but I just love the graphic novel format. I have read the Fangirl series by Rainbow Rowell as a graphic novel. I have another graphic novel I read earlier this year was called Manfred the Man, which I read for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR to describe Phoebe's character. So this book is getting 5 stars, just like I Am Malala did, and I will be reading a sequel pretty soon because I'm going to be putting it on reserve at the library tomorrow. When I went to Bull Moose the other day to drop off some donations, one book that I picked up there was I, Medusa, which was a new release by Ivana Gray. This is a new author for me. It is a retelling of the story of Medusa. I learned about Medusa in 6th grade when I was learning about Greek mythology, and I love how this modernly retells her story. I started this last Saturday on the 20th, and I am on page 261, so I'm going to probably finish this tomorrow. The next book I am rereading is My Friends by Friedrich Bachmann. I got this for my birthday from my mother-in-law, and the reason why I am rereading this is because my mother and father recently watched Stand By Me in honor to memorialize Rob Reiner's recent death, and she realized that this book's plot is very similar to Stand By Me. So what I am going to be doing is rereading this book, and then Matt and I are renting the movie from the library in end of January, beginning of February. And what I'm going to do is compare this book's plot to the plot of Stand By Me and tell you guys which character is the same. The next book that Kathleen and I are buddy reading that is not related to the Friends and Gilmore Girls TBR is The Book Club for a Troublesome Woman by Marie Bostwick. This is another new author to me. Currently, I am on chapter 17, page 161. I started this book on Sunday, the 21st. And now I'm going to haul 2 books that I got for Christmas. And then in future videos, I'm going to be hauling more books I got for Christmas as I spend gift card money I have accumulated. The first book is a book I got from my mom. This is from a local author who is actually somebody who works with my sister. This is a new author to me. It's called Heartward by Emma Hartley. It's a new romance novel, so I'm really excited to read this. Currently, I am on page 61. And finally, my mother-in-law gifted this to me for Christmas. It is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingslover. I read this in 2023. It was one of my top books of 2023, along with A Man Called Ove. And I am really excited to read this again because it has been a long time. And also, it is the book club book for January at Print Bookstore for the Beers and Brews book club that Rachel Conrad runs. So I am very excited to discuss this book with other people and see what they think. So thank you for tuning in. I will be back on January 20th with another book haul, and on January 11th with another reading progress update. Have a great start to 2026, everybody.